Welcome back to the podcast, episode number 4. What's going on, Adam?
Not much, bro. Just chilling. Beautiful day.
Yeah.
To be inside, I guess, doing a podcast. I mean, new stuff in the Jiu Jitsu world and in the life world, which I guess we'll get into today. Last episode, we spoke a little bit about good instructors, bad instructors, good gyms, bad gyms, things to look out for. So if that interests you, go back and have a listen to that. But otherwise today, we're talking a little bit about team separation, conflict between teams and students and instructors. More recently, the more that happened not long ago was the separation of the Danaher death squad, was the more recent team news outbreak.
But so this isn't a new story, is it? Seems like a bit of a history is repeating itself, which that's something that I learned of yourself, Adam. Being a fairly new white belt to the sport, the Danaher death squad has always been like the number one team. Yeah. But after speaking with you sort of around the time that it was announced and it all sort of was falling apart and all going down, it was sort of, history repeating itself.
Man, like teams split up all the time. We can talk a little bit more specifically about the Danaher death squad also because I want to hear your thoughts. I believe you have, the nitty gritty details aren't super important because
inside information.
Yeah, you've got a little bit of inside information, but you could read one Instagram post from whoever, Gary Tonin, and it might conflict another Instagram post from John Danaher.
That's so funny that you mentioned Gary because ironically, at the time of this recording, he's the only team member that hasn't said.
Oh, really?
He hasn't said a word.
Yeah,
he hasn't had a peep.
Yeah.
He just keeps posting on his Instagram of his spicy Instagram, raunchy chicks, and what have you.
I mean, for me, like any information I've heard about it is just whatever's been online. I mean, I don't know any of those athletes, students, instructors personally. Like I've met Craig due to the fact that we're both in the jiu-jitsu scene in Australia and, he visited the gym that I'm out of in Brazil. So, but it's not like I talk to him or anything. I don't really know him personally. So I've only heard what other people have heard. Yeah, public information. And, reading anything online, you got to take it with a grain of salt because it's usually, particularly if you're looking at social media posts, like it's always coming from one particular individual's point of view.
Yeah, and it's what they want you to know. So in a nutshell, Danaher, in his original posts that he posted on 25th of July, he basically cited the team splitting up for 4 reasons. First was the fact that they can't agree on the location of their new school. The second one was a personality conflict between members. Nothing specific was said. Third point was a value conflict between members. And fourth, which I personally think is the most significant, was that the Danaher Death Squad as a brand, it's basically a conflict between the Danaher Death Squad as a brand itself and individual members of the Death Squad and their personal brands that are growing. So that to me, that's just talking business. That is purely money. That is where the crux of it is. That's the elephant in the room. This whole split up is to do with money. My personal take on it, and this could be completely wrong.
Don't you have a YouTube video talking about
but
your,
this actually,
opinion on this shameless plug to my friend across the table here?
Yeah. So I did do a video on this like the day after it was announced, but there's so much more information even now that's come out. And by the time that this podcast hits the streets, this is probably old. But honestly, I think the whole thing is to do with money. I think that it's a strategy or a ploy to not get rid of, but sort of lay to rest the name Danaher Death Squad. And I think the key players, Danaher and Gordon Ryan, they're going to keep pursuing what they were already going to be pursuing, but without the name associated with it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It could be old news, new news, the team splitting up. It's irrelevant. There's some repeating factors as to why teams split up. I mean, you mentioned the 4 reasons. I would say you could almost ignore the first three. The main reason teams split up is that fourth reason. But
100%.
But before we venture off the Danaher Death Squad, and because I could already tell you reasons that they have split up or why they would have in the future, just based on the name, which I'll explain a little bit. But just before we move off from the Danaher squad specifically and just talk about team conflict and team separation, I don't want to name any names, but you have some slight inside information. I am just curious though, like the first thing you said was one of the reasons was because they couldn't decide on the location. But I'm confused. Didn't they just open a new school in Puerto Rico?
No, so they haven't. They didn't actually open the school in Puerto Rico. Now, the whole location thing is where everyone's tunnel visioning, or everyone is in like after the announcement, the first like 24 hours or 48 hours after the announcement, everyone was like, "Oh, it's location, location, location." The reason being is, yes, they just moved to Puerto Rico, and it was the first point that Danaher made in the post. So, people psychologically are tunnel visioning into that. But I don't think that's really the biggest issue, because, if location was the biggest concern, then it would have been a concern before they moved to Puerto Rico. So they effectively, now forgive me, my history is a little bit off on this, but they went from New York City to Puerto Rico during the height of COVID back in 2020, start of 2020, when it was really hitting New York City very, very hard. All the restrictions are locked down. So they bugged out. They went to Puerto Rico. But it's my understanding that they were in talks at that point to leave New York City regardless. So they were looking to leave, and they're looking at Texas way back then. So I don't really think that location is the primary concern, if you will.
Right, okay.
I just don't.
Yeah, I don't follow the Jiu Jitsu media, 200% and read every single article and Instagram post, so I was just under the assumption that they moved to Puerto Rico already. Like I thought they moved there to establish a new school. I guess now that you're saying it, it makes sense that they moved to get out of New York while it was really bad there, being from Alliance and from Fabio, Fabio and I would often, talk about how Marcelo was going and that his school was closed. Marcelo himself was in pretty much self-quarantine for ages because of, he didn't want to go out. He's got kids and his family and everything. So,
risk.
And then obviously on the Australian scene outside of Craig, you've got Levi, who often lives in New York training at Unity. I think he went back to New York after things started lifting, but, same sort of deal, right? It was really rough in New York. I think it was at one point essentially the epicenter of COVID in the US, wasn't it?
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah, they got hit very hard.
Yeah. Okay, so they were always planning to move from Puerto Rico back to the US once COVID settled down.
That's my understanding, yeah. Like it wasn't super public, but I believe that the whole Puerto Rico thing was always meant to be temporary.
Right. I do want to make a funny little side note on the Death Squad split up. And I was talking to Fabio yesterday, and we were just talking about the Death Squad breakup. And he kind of said, yeah, well, is it really considered a team breakup when the team consists of 6 dudes?
Yeah.
And if you look at the moment, all the posts where people are making memes of like sad faces with the team split up, it's like a photo of like 5-6 dudes.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, that's 5-6 incredibly talented dudes, but I just thought it was funny that Fabio said that. He was like, well, can you really, like, is it really a team if it's 6 dudes? Which I don't know. I'm not gonna debate whether it is or not. I thought it was just quite a humorous comment.
Yeah. Oh, Fabio. Yeah. So in terms of like team dynamics, like I mentioned in the outset, this is the first big thing to really rock the jiu-jitsu world in my sort of jiu-jitsu lifespan so far.
You mean in the last 11 months?
Yeah, in the last 11 months, man. Come off it. White belts unite.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is like the big thing. Like I mentioned in a couple episodes ago, I think like, the whole Gordon Ryan Craig Jones, those names are the big names that I knew from day one. So effectively
Yeah.
the death squad.
Yeah.
And now they're like, oh, I'll split up, no more.
Yeah.
So this is a new thing though in jiu-jitsu space.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll tell you the first problem with the brand or the name, and this is a problem that a lot of unsuccessful jiu-jitsu teams or gyms make, which is naming the gym after yourself or putting a name in the title. So I don't think this was intentional. Like, I believe in an interview years ago, Danaher was saying that it wasn't intentional that that was the name of his squad, right? Like, I believe it happened organically. It was a nickname and then became the name, right? But I'll give you an example of what happens, right? When you name a gym or a team and you put your name in the title, you're always going to run into issues when you have students or athletes start to grow and become their own superstar. Let's even, like, maybe ego's not even an issue, right? Ego
Branding.
aside, but yeah, branding, right? And they get to a point where they go, let's say you and I were, Craig Jones, for example, like we were in that position. Let's just swap places with that person. And you go, well, would I go open a Danaher death squad, or would I open a Kieren death squad or a Adam death squad? Like, you get to a point where you think, well, if anyone's name is going to be in the title, like, it should be my name.
Yeah.
Right. And it happens all the time. Right. Another more recent example is, let's look at Cobrinha, right? And his son Kennedy. So, all of a sudden you'll have, like, a time will come where Kennedy probably doesn't want to wear a Cobrinha patch. He'll start being like, oh, that's my dad, like, I want my name, right? Like, you look at, like, active blue purple belt competitors, they've got their own name blasted all over their gi, right? Like, whether you want to call it branding, marketing, self-promotion, right? So you get to a point where your students just, they value their own name and brand more than someone else's. Whereas when you go with a team name like Gracie Barra, Alliance, Atos, something like that, right? It's something bigger than any one individual. I'm not saying you still can't have splits and separation and, from team names, but I'm just pointing out the fact that it has the word Danaher in it, it's inherently flawed, right? In terms of a brand.
I have to 100% agree.
Like, sorry to cut you off, Kieren, but just to finish off my thought, another example is when teams then do affiliate under their own name, like, you never get superstars affiliating under your name, right? So let's say, okay, like Marcelo Garcia and Cobrinha, they have some affiliates under them that operate under that name, but they're people that are fans of them as athletes and competitors, and they make a gym under that brand and name. But there's no, like, it's not like Mateus Diniz, one of Marcelo's key black belts, has his own gym called Marcelo Garcia Jiu-Jitsu, right? And then so people start going like, oh yeah, I train out of Marcelo Garcia Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a brown belt, from Marcelo Garcia Jiu-Jitsu. And you go, oh yeah, man, awesome. I'd love to train with Marcelo one day. And then the person's like, oh yeah, me too. Oh, what do you mean? I thought you were Marcelo Garcia trained there. He's like, oh yeah, but the Marcelo Garcia in Germany.
Yeah.
So you've never met Marcelo, Or another one's like High and Gracie. Oh, I'm a High and Gracie black belt. Dude, he died a long time ago, right? Like, so it's just inherently flawed when you have your name in the title.
Yeah, I have to 100% agree. And I think in Danaher's original post, his first post about the announcement, he mentioned that explicitly. And
did he?
Yeah, he worded it well in the phrase of like how the people are like the team is conflicted with the branding of the team versus branding of individuals.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest reason. And when it comes to branding and media in any industry, but particularly in jiu-jitsu, where, let's be honest, there's not that much money in jiu-jitsu. All of the money
in terms of a professional sport, it's very
exactly.
minimal.
There's thousands of people worldwide trying to make a full-time living being a competitor, a media producer from jiu-jitsu. Like, let's ignore gym owners for a second because that's actually a product. Like, that's a tangible service that you're providing.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, like, you know, the superstars, the athletes, the media, there's not that much money because the sport is just not big enough to support everyone at this point. So there's a scarcity mentality, right? And when you have so many people fighting over such a small pool of money, branding is everything.
Yeah,
so it's a money issue.
Yeah, and it kind of goes, we were talking about it in a previous episode where we talked a bit about trash talking and, you know, we talked about MMA and Conor McGregor and that people trash talk just as a way to make themselves more marketable and whatnot. And I mean, it happens in jiu-jitsu as well, right? Like, and so again, yeah, people value their own name and brand far more than the name of someone else, right? And I mean, even when you're part of a bigger team that has a name that doesn't involve anyone's personal name, like Alliance or Atos or something, you know, those individuals still market themselves as well, but they, you know, represent that, you know, it's then not seen as a conflict, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know,
they're elevating their own brand. They're associated with the team brand. Therefore, they're elevating both.
Exactly right.
But in this case, it's not quite the same, is it?
Yeah. You know, again, obviously I keep referring to Alliance because it's the team that I'm from, right?
Oh, really?
But, but you know, like if you like Fabio, I mean, back in the early days, before Alliance existed, it was called Master Jiu-Jitsu, which was after Master Jacare. But you know, like you go to Fabio's gym, the word Jacare is nowhere to be seen. You go to Fabio's gym, the word Fabio is nowhere to be seen, right? Like it's, you know, because nowadays Fabio's semi-retired, at least from teaching. So like if it was like Fabio Jiu-Jitsu and you walk in there and he's only there teaching one day a month,
where's the
or
longevity?
something, yeah, right.
So that's a man that actually cares about his team. And
well, I mean, like if you wanted to, he wants
the
to
legacy of
the
the team,
legacy of
rather
the
than
team,
him
right?
as an individual.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
I respect that quite a lot.
It's almost as if jiu-jitsu competitors have got ego issues.
No way.
You reckon?
Nah. So speaking of
maybe
Alliance,
that's why you and I are so bad at competing. Because we don't have an ego.
Yeah, that's exactly
Super
right.
humble.
My ego is non-existent. Very humble. This is the humble podcast. Humble Jiu-Jitsu. We need a name. So I did have on the agenda today, I did want to talk about the history of Alliance. And off air, we're talking about this, you know, in preparation for the episode, talking about the death squad splitting up and everything like that. And then you gave me a quick black belt smackdown on a history lesson. So
like you said, you were like, this is the biggest thing.
This
Like
is the
in my
biggest thing
jiu-jitsu.
ever. Yeah, and you're like, dude, chill.
This has happened so many times.
Chill out, man.
Yeah.
So history of Alliance.
So, you know, in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
So Jacare, who Romero Cavalcanti is his name, like, but he's known as Jacare. So when you say Jacare, most people think about Jacare, who I don't know, does he still fight in the UFC? Jacare, who
No idea.
Anyway, there's a very famous jiu-jitsu competitor, Jacare, that had his arm broken by Roger Gracie in a world title fight.
Yep.
But Jacare won the fight because he was up on points and then time ran out, right? But anyway.
So it's not him. We're not talking about this guy.
Not him.
Okay.
No. So Jacare from Alliance his coach was Holes Gracie. Holes Gracie was like all the way back, like pretty much one of the originals. Like, so do you know who Rickson Gracie is?
Yes.
So Rickson Gracie is one of the most famous Gracies. Holes Gracie was Rickson's coach.
Oh, wow.
Right. So Jacare learnt alongside Rickson, as well as Fabio did to some degree as well. Like Fabio's told me some funny stories about him training with Rickson. But
okay,
anyway.
so just so we got it straight, Rickson, he was Rickson's coach.
Who? Holes Gracie.
Yes.
Holes Gracie was. Yeah. And
so
Jacare,
we're talking, so we have Holes Gracie. Under Holes Gracie, we have Rickson Gracie.
Rickson, and alongside him, Jacare and some other Gracies.
And Fabio.
Yeah. And I think above Holes Gracie was just like Elio and Carlos Gracie, like the super
OGs.
Originals. Yeah.
Super OGs.
So Jacare goes back to the times in Rio, like really more or less like was one of the few non-Gracies to be learning with.
Right. So what timeline are we talking about? Are we talking 70s, 80s? I don't even know.
Dude,
trying to place
this.
this.
Jeez. I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah, I've never memorized the years.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then Fabio was Jacare's first black belt, and not long after followed Gigi. Alexandra Paiva is his name, but Gigi. So you've got Jacare, Gigi, and Fabio. And they kind of went their own ways, not because of conflict, but, Jacare, they just lived in different areas, right? Life goes on. And their own students kept competing against each other in competitions. And they were like, oh man, I don't want my students to fight Jacare's students because they're like family, right? So they made the team alliance in 1993 was when they made the team alliance.
This is Jacare and Fabio.
And Gigi.
Okay, so these
as
three.
a way to unify their three schools.
Okay.
And so that was how Alliance was founded, right? In 1993, it was a way for Jacare, Fabio, and Gigi to come together.
Right.
Since then, right, they had, I think it was 2002 was when they had the famous Alliance split, right? It was quite a big exodus of the highest level competitors, like not only from Alliance, but essentially in the world. They had the two main names that they had, I believe. I mean, they had multiple big names.
Talking like athlete names?
Athletes, yeah.
Right.
But the two big ones they had were Eduardo Teles and Terere, Fernando Terere.
Right.
Right?
I've heard of him.
Yeah. So the other day I was telling Kieren about Terere and he had no idea who I was talking about, which is fine because like it's quite a long time ago. There's people before my time in jiu-jitsu that I unfortunately don't know who they are, and how relevant they were and are. But anyway, Terere particularly was super feared. Like he was regarded as, despite his massive smile on his face and looking like a very friendly dude, was considered more or less like the best in the world. Terere was an absolute beast. But what happened, right, is there was the IBJJF, and to compete with the IBJJF, there was another federation that was founded in Brazil, and they tried to compete with the IBJJF. And the way that they tried to do that was to offer prize money, right? Whereas even today in 2021,
hardly any prize money.
You don't get anything for winning IBJJF competitions, okay? But yeah, let alone back then, okay, in the early 2000s. So this other I forget what it was called, CBJ, Confederation, something. Anyway.
So needless to say, they were unsuccessful.
Yes. And so they started to offer prize money. And there was a bit of a split between certain teams and coaches. For example, like Novo União, they pretty much stopped competing in all IBJJF competitions, right? They would just compete in this confederation competitions to win money. But IBJJF was still by some or by most people, and definitely by Fabio, was considered the more respectable organization. And so what happened, right, is there was a competition on the same weekend. There was the Brasileiro de Equipes, which is like the Brazilian teams competition. I actually don't know if this still exists in Brazil. While I was living there, this competition still existed. Where
this is IBJJF?
Yeah. So this was an IBJJF competition, and you would have a team of athletes. So like Fabio would select, and sorry, it's worth pointing out that even though Jacare is like Fabio and Gigi's coach, Fabio kind of became the head of the association, right? Like he's pretty much the main guy, the main coach, he's really the guy at the front of the team. So there was like this team competition where Fabio would pick, let's say, his 5 best blue belts, and they would represent Alliance and
across all of the Alliance affiliates in that area, right?
Yeah, and you would fight, the 5
Gracie
blue
Barra
belts from Gracie Barra or whatever, and you would have that for each belt, right?
Yeah,
so it would be an honor to even be selected to be put on Fabio's team, right? And there was a competition. There was a Brasileiro de Equipes, and on the same weekend, but a different day, there was a Confederate competition. Right. I believe the Confederate competition was on the Saturday and the IBJJF competition was on the Sunday. So Eduardo Teles, Ted Adair, and all these guys wanted to fight the Confederate competition on the Saturday because it gives prize money, right? And as anyone who competes in jiu-jitsu knows, and we said just before, it's very hard to make money in jiu-jitsu. So of course, if something's offering money, you want to do that. Fabio told them they weren't allowed. He was like, you can't compete in this rival organization the day before you're about to fight and represent the team in IBJJF competition, right? You're going to use all your energy in this competition, right?
Which makes sense. Anyone that's competed would agree with that.
Very hard to compete 2 days in a row. Plus, that was like the rival organization, right? But they did. They went and fought on the Saturday.
Ooh, Dad would not be happy.
Yeah. So Fabio essentially, he didn't kick them out, but they received like a 3-month ban or something like that from the team. And then
so these other head coaches, like these other big dogs, black belts that establish alliance with Fabio. But as you said, Fabio sort of became the leader of the organization. He was the head coach, the manager, running the business side of things, I presume.
Yeah.
He issued a 3-month ban as punishment for going against his wishes to compete in IBJJF.
That's right. And then
spicy.
Yeah. Like, look, Fabio, it's worth pointing out before everyone's sitting here going, wow, Fabio's a prick. Fabio's spoken at length about this issue and that, it's, not his most fond memory. And,
yeah, of course.
Damian Meyer, sorry, that's one of the other people. So a lot of people don't know Damian Meyer is a student of Damian Meyer, UFC. Damian Meyer is a student of Fabio's as well.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's not one of his fondest memories, right?
Mm.
So, and he's a very different person now. If you know Fabio personally, you would know he's different today as he was, 20, 30 years ago.
We won't judge him.
Yeah, because he can kick our ass.
Yeah, definitely.
So after the 3 months were up, I can't remember exactly what happened, but, just relationships were sour.
Yeah,
and
of course.
So these guys left the team, right? So mainly Eduardo Teles and Ted Adair, they left and they made a team called TT, right? Teles, Ted Adair. And and Alliance was essentially left with no one. All their big black belts left, right? Because then there were other people who were friends with Ted Adair or more chummy with Ted Adair and Teles and Damian Meyer.
People pick sides, basically.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like what's going to happen with the Death Squad. Some people will go train with Gordon, some with Gary, some with wherever they each go, right? So Alliance was left with essentially nothing. And then TT became a really good predominant team, right? And they were rather successful. But then after a little while, I think it was maybe 2008 or something like that, TT dissolved as a team, right? That was a slightly different reason. Like Ted Adair had personal reasons and whatever. But, as that team dissolved, then that went on to create other teams. So like, you probably don't know this, but under Ted Adair, you've got black belts like Cobrinha.
Oh, no, I knew this.
Yeah. Cobrinha is a black belt under Ted Adair that, Cobrinha is more seen as a student of Fabio's and an Alliance black belt, but he's a black belt from Ted Adair. Andre Galvão is as well.
Oh, there you go.
So then after TT dissolved, a lot of students from TT ended up back in São Paulo and ended up back training with Fabio. Fabio kind of lucked out. So guys,
São Paulo is that where the Alliance gym?
That's where the
is?
Alliance
Okay.
headquarters is. Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's 3 headquarters. There's Fabio's gym, Gigi's gym, and Jacare's gym. But yeah, Fabio's gym is in São Paulo.
Right. That's right.
And he had some other people leave their teams to move to São Paulo. He had Bruno Malfacini, Luana Alzuguir. So he got an influx of really high level black belts, quite luckily, but then other athletes went their own way, so from the disperse of the TT team came Atos, came Checkmat, right? And then, Alliance managed to rebound and become incredibly successful.
Yeah, right. So,
but the original, if we go back to look at the original split, why did they split? Man, it's egos. And when I was talking to Fabio the other day about the Danaher separation, one of his biggest mistakes and what led to this split is when a team or the head instructor doesn't provide opportunities for the individuals within the team, right? So
And this is coming from Fabio
yeah,
through
yeah,
self-reflection.
yeah. So that and ego, right, results in things like what happened in the early 2000s with Alliance, results in what's happening with the Danaher Death Squad. Not only is there a problem with the branding of the name, but I would argue as well there's probably, along with personality conflicts and ego, the up and comers probably don't feel they have the opportunity to grow within that brand, within that team, right? They're probably feeling maybe they're under the thumb, for lack of a better term, of the head honchos like Danaher, like
Right,
Gordon
in their
Ryan.
shadow, of course.
Yeah, maybe in
so
their
you're not talking, sorry, just to clarify here, you're not talking they don't have opportunity to grow their jiu-jitsu because obviously training under the world's best jiu-jitsu, arguably the best in the world for no-gi, they would have that opportunity. But what you're saying is as an individual, their personal growth in the sport as a whole is being like stifled and limited
Yeah.
under the shadow of these really massive names and brands and personalities.
Yeah. And this is, again, like I think you said it perfectly. A lot of this is self-reflection from Fabio's mistakes, and being the head of a team that's been around for 30 years, won 12 world titles. He made similar mistakes even when Marcelo and Lepre went their own ways and made their own brands. They stayed under Alliance, and as time went by, they even came back to Fabio and expressed the difficulties that they're having running teams under their own name opposed to a bigger brand name, right? So this is all self-reflection, and it goes back to what we spoke about at the start. If you were a Danaher Death Squad member, student, or let's maybe look down the track, and when Gary opens his gym, I believe he's opening one in Austin in Texas, right?
Yeah. So Gordon Ryan is
Gordon,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Sorry, what did I say?
Gary.
Sorry. Same dude, right? Yeah. So like Gordon's opening a gym in Austin, Texas. I don't know what he's going to name it, but let's say he names it Gordon Ryan Jiu-Jitsu. Man, the people who come up in 5-10 years, once Gordon's got a student who's winning ADCCs and whatever, he's not going to want to open a Gordon Ryan Jiu-Jitsu. He's going to want to open insert my name here, Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
Because the opportunity is limited by the name. And, what happened to Alliance is slightly different because it didn't have that branding issue. But, Fabio obviously tried to maybe control the students a little bit too much, didn't give them the opportunity to make money, to grow, and, hence the really toxic environment, and people went their separate ways.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the whole time you were mentioning people want their own name. For those that have read How to Win Friends and Influence People by the infamous Dale Carnegie, one of the first lines in that book is people the sweetest sound anyone can hear is the sound of their own name.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard that.
And that is so true for all of this. This isn't a jiu-jitsu thing. To me, this is like a human psychology thing. People want to hear their own name. And then when you add business on top of that, then you add an ego, a very, high ego, arguably sometimes alpha male dominated sport, like high combat sport like jiu-jitsu, it amplifies the problem.
Yeah.
So that, to me, this is textbook psychology. People want to hear their own name. And like you said, 30 years down the track, once Gordon Ryan retires, and he, no offense to him, but his name is less prominent, it happens to all athletes. It happens to
everyone, bro.
Buchecha, for example, he was a dominating force, and I literally had to, I kept hearing his name in the gym because, you teach a lot of history and everything like that, and to your students, I had to go away and try and find out who this guy was.
The spotlight in jiu-jitsu is so fleeting.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's pretty much 99% influenced by whoever's chummy with flow grappling, but
what are you trying to say?
Other big names like Hodger Gracie, right? And I don't know if this was maybe before your before you started training as well. Do you know that Hodger and Buchecha fought? Do you know about that or
Yes,
no?
yes.
So
I saw that because it was that match was mentioned on the mats in your gym, and I went away and YouTube
right.
it.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Hodger was long retired. You know, Buchecha essentially took over Hodger's throne. They had one super fight that I think Hodger didn't give Buchecha the respect he deserved. And it was a submission only match that went the full time limit. But, you know, Buchecha more or less dominated. And then a couple of years later, they had another match and it was just, man, Hodger made Buchecha
Oh,
look like a white belt.
that's the one I saw.
Like it just
it was
really
bad.
solidified that Hodger is one of, if not the greatest of all time. Like we're talking the gi, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Death Squad's known for no gi. But anyway, like it's so fleeting, your name. I guarantee you, side by side, if you had, let's ignore no gi for now and keep it gi. Let's say you put 2 seminars on the same day, side by side, and you had Hodger Gracie and who's a more current, like black belt world champion, like let's say, or maybe not even a world champion, let's say Levi, right?
Mhm.
Who's really, dominant at the moment. More people will go to Levi's seminar. Of
course.
There's people who are Levi fans don't even know who Hodger is. You know, it won't be once Gordon's retired and time goes on. Yeah, people would prefer to do a seminar with a purple belt who won a competition and is all over flow grappling than with Gordon Ryan.
Like someone like a blue or purple belt from Daisy Fresh or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, because whoever's got the better media coverage, which
Mm.
essentially means Flow Grappling. Flow Grappling have a monopoly on the jiu-jitsu media. So if you're not getting reported on by Flow Grappling, no one knows who you are, blah, 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 blah.
Let me throw a curveball at you. Do you think that this is because of social media? Like these older names that you're talking about that still, you know, that are still around. Like Buchecha's still obviously around. Like he's not actively competing, but he still exists
Yeah.
in the jiu-jitsu world. But I have seen nothing of his on social media. He's not active on social media.
Yeah,
He
but
doesn't have a presence. He's not, you know,
Yeah.
posting YouTube videos. He's not putting his name out there. Like these young, active, competitive, hungry athletes.
Well, I don't know if I mean, yeah, maybe social media, but is it due to their personal social media? I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
that's
if
what
you
I'm-
look at,
that's what I'm-
let's say, for example, some of the big names at the moment, like the entire Daisy Fresh crew, Mika Galval,
Mm.
right? None of these guys I'm aware of because of their individual social media. It's because of Flow Grappling, right?
Right.
And there's other big names and competitions happening in Brazil, right? Because they have similar lockdown restrictions to the US. None. By that I mean none. So there's competitions happening in Brazil with other big names like, I think like Urbith Santos and Zaki Bayance, Nicholas Marigali, and all these other big names, but it's not getting really any coverage from Flow Grappling. So people don't know about it.
Yeah, I only know a couple of those names because you know you have put me onto them.
Yeah.
So
So,
makes sense.
is it but due to their individual social media or more just the jiu-jitsu media? I think it's just more a result of the jiu-jitsu media.
yeah, that makes sense.
But
yeah.
you know,
follow the money.
Yeah.
Follow the money.
Follow the money. But I think, it's also when we look at the flaw in the branding of the name, but also, like I briefly said, not having opportunities for the younger up and comers, right? Even if it wasn't named the Danaher Death Squad, even if it was just named the Death Squad team, right?
Yeah.
If you don't provide opportunities, let's say, for example, let's look at you and I, right? Let's imagine you get to a point, like in my opinion, the way I treat my students is like it's, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like university. I don't expect my students to be in my gym forever, right? At some stage, let's say hypothetically you do jiu-jitsu for the rest of your life, right? And you never quit and you never move cities or whatever. You might just keep casually being a student at my gym, or you might go your own way and, you graduate, for lack of a better term, and go open your own gym, right? It's like, it's like the kid leaving the nest, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. But let's imagine down the track, you get a black belt, you want to open your own gym. Unless there's a a valid reason for you to open another alliance gym rather than just your own brand, right? Why would you do it? I mean, yeah, there's some loyalty to the team and the team name, and you want to like be associated with it. But particularly when you're starting a small business and money's on the line, if there can be more money made in you creating a new brand called, whatever, wooden table jiu-jitsu, right? Like whatever you call it. Or even if you decide to call it, even if you decide to call it, Kieren Jiu-Jitsu, if there can be more money made doing that rather than opening an alliance team and paying affiliation fees and everything, like, wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Right?
it's your own thing as well.
Yeah, and it's your own thing, right? And people, then you're more proud of it. It's your own thing. So you have to provide maybe, opportunity, is maybe not the best word, but you need to make the student or the instructor who's going to go open their own gym, make them feel like they're part of it, and that's work culture in general, like if anyone who's had just a regular office job, when a boss gives you some sort of ownership over a project or something you're working on, you take way more pride in it.
100%.
And it's something
leadership
important.
101.
Yeah. Right. And so it's the same thing. If I just say to you, oh, Kieren, yeah, sick, you're going to go open your other gym, open an alliance gym, you've got to pay this affiliation fee. And what you get in return is that you're part of Alliance. You'd be like, well, or Adam, hear me out. I could not do that.
Yeah.
Keep that money for myself.
Yeah.
And that's really important when you're opening a brand new small business, right? Where a lot of small businesses fail in the beginning, and like that whatever it is, that $1,000 affiliation fee a year or whatever, when you're a small business, it's an overhead that if you don't need to pay that overhead, why would you?
Yeah.
So maybe, just speculating, the Danaher Death Squad could have split because of those reasons as well, like issues with the branding and opportunities for the younger athletes. And, once you start getting into the business side of it.
I think you're right, because to add context, Gordon Ryan was talking about, they had an announcement coming up because they were creating an affiliate program under the banner of Danaher Death Squad affiliates.
Yep.
And that was obviously going to come with, a price tag. They were going to look at branching out and effectively selling their name in some fashion. I don't know exactly how that was going to look because they never actually announced it. But that to me right there, that was put on hold. That was cancelled due to the Danaher Death Squad splitting up. Is an affiliate program still going to be released out of Gordon Ryan and John Danaher? Absolutely. Is it going to be called the Danaher Death Squad? No. That's what I think this is.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll probably get Gordon Ryan groupies affiliating under it. Like a lot of, affiliate programs function that way. It's a lot of, I don't want to, it sounds like I'm ragging on people who affiliate under other people's name. I don't mean to put it as blunt as that, but just to simplify it, it's just groupies. You're not going to get all of a sudden, you're not going to get, well, you would never, I was going to say Andre Galvao because he just came into my head. You're never going to get anyone from Atos affiliating under them, but you're not going to get, some big name competitor. Like you're never going to get Keenan Cornelius going like, yeah, I'm going to open a Gordon Ryan Jiu-Jitsu, right?
Yeah, why would he?
Well, why would he?
Yeah.
Right. But we'll see what happens with it. If you want to talk about the correct way to affiliate, I think you got to look at it. You got to look at it like a business. You got to take loyalty out of it. It's a big problem with the jiu-jitsu culture as well, is how much weight people put on loyalty. Don't get me wrong. There's obviously rapport built between instructors and students and training partners, and loyalty between you and your team and everything. Of course, I get that. But it is a business. Unless you're a gym owner who is loaded and you're just running the gym essentially as a money sink because you're a millionaire and you don't care, or
so Joe Rogan opens the gym.
or if you're doing it as a sort of a social welfare project, that happens a lot in Brazil. There's a lot of gyms that are opened as ways to get kids off the street, and they're they don't
awesome.
charge membership, so there's programs like that. Putting those aside, man, it is a business, and rapport's built, but at the end of the day, you're charging students for a service, right? And you're providing that service. I mean, it's a business transaction,
Mm.
right? So, students sometimes feel like they owe something to their team and their instructor. No, man, you paid your fees and you probably paid up front, right? You
Mm.
usually like pay your gym membership in advance,
Mm.
whether weekly, monthly, whatever. So it's actually the opposite.
Mm.
It's the gym that owes you something, right? They owe you the service. And so then when you expand on that and talk about affiliate programs, man, like you really need to put aside loyalty and all that sort of stuff and look at it like a business. And if you're wanting to do an affiliate program and you're wanting to charge people an affiliation fee or a franchise fee, and they're two different things, by the way. Like, I'm not a business guru, but affiliation.
We're getting a business lesson right now, ads. Keep it coming.
But I mean, I know a lot of this not only because I'm with Alliance, but I spent pretty much a decade being one of the international managers for the Alliance Association. But there's a difference between a franchise program and an affiliation program, right? It's just worth pointing that out. Franchise, you pay more, get more.
Yep.
More or less.
Affiliate, you essentially take the name.
Kind of, yeah.
And you're on your own, right?
Yeah, sort of, yeah. So the two main ones that are known is like Gracie Barra. They're like a franchise business model. Alliance,
like McDonald's. Like I'm not trying to say that they're a McDojo or anything, but I'm just trying to say McDonald's is a franchise similar to how Gracie Barra is a franchise.
Yeah, like if you open a Gracie Barra, you have way more rules and everything you need to follow.
Yeah.
You pay more for your fees, but you also get more support and
like
stuff
they give you
that.
the program, they give you all the branding.
Yeah.
Like they support you in that way.
And an affiliation program, to put it simply, you pay a little less, you get a little less.
Okay.
But anyway, if you're wanting to make an affiliation franchise scheme business model, it is business. So if I'm going to charge you $1,000 a year or $100 a month, whatever it is, for you to be part of my affiliation, you're going to say to me, what do I get for that money?
Mm.
And if I say to you, you get to use the name Alliance, or you get to use the name Gordon Ryan, I mean, look, things are worth whatever people are willing to pay for it, right? So you might go, awesome. Or you might go, no, right? Like, I mean, you got to give me something for your money. Right. And so Alliance, for example, has, they help with social media posts and instructors courses and, a whole bunch of stuff. Gracie Barra provide, curriculums that you have to follow and whatever. But, so if Gordon and Danaher are doing that model, it may be very successful, right? If they name it appropriately, if they give it the correct brand and don't name it after an individual person, I think that's the first biggest mistake.
Yeah.
If they name it correctly, call it whatever, even if it's just Death Squad Jiu Jitsu, right?
Yeah.
Call it whatever, and they actually provide you something for the fee that you're paying. Cool. Then it might be super successful and go on to become, one of the biggest, most dominant teams.
Yeah. I have to.
And I hope
agree.
it does, the more competition, the better, right? I hope it does turn into that. Time will tell, right? We'll see.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And I think it's really good to hear from your perspective as someone that's done this, someone that is involved in business and jiu-jitsu, because at the end of the day, like I said, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this whole thing is about business and it's about money. So to have that insight, I think we, we don't need to know about the juicy goss of like, oh, who said what or whatever. I think, this can be boiled down to a business decision.
Yeah, man, it's, you said it a million times today, follow the money. It's
Yep.
always about money. And, you're the Death Squad, I said at the start, it's like 6 dudes, right? It's not only 6 dudes, besides Gordon's recent retirement, like it's 6, 7, 10, whatever. It's a small group of active competitors. I know there are more people in the team than that. There's obviously, because there's more other people in the team that train with those guys. It's not literally just those 6 dudes in a room training together. But, the key guys, it's a small group of people, they're active competitors. It is very hard to be active competitor and an instructor at the same time, let alone not only just an instructor, but someone who runs a gym.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do that at the same time. Not to go into too much of a ramble about it, but if you're an active competitor, you're wanting to be the best in the world, you have to have some level of, you have to be a little bit selfish, right? Your training comes first. Whereas when you're an instructor, if you want to be a good instructor, your students' training comes first, right? And so it's hard to do both those things.
So I suppose in the case of Gordon Ryan and others, time will tell if they're successful in that. If Gordon does stay retired and he does become a very effective instructor, or if he brings someone else in, or maybe it will just sort of crumble.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Gordon is a good instructor. I've seen some of his instructionals and stuff. I think he explains things well.
Yeah. Very succinct.
Yeah. He comes from a very good coach, right? So if he tries to emulate that, why wouldn't he be successful? A lot of Fabio's students who have gone on to open gyms, like myself, try to emulate the way he teaches, and Fabio's been proven as, the best, at least, if we're talking about gi, before the Death Squad came along, the best instructor, the Freddie Roach of the jiu-jitsu world. So I don't see there's any reason why Gordon won't be successful. It's just whether he correctly does the business side of things. Because there's a lot of other things, man. You could be a great instructor in terms of how you teach and run your class, but what if your gym's one of those, toxic ones where you control your students with fear, or
like we're talking about last episode.
Like, where you don't let your students train with their friend who trains at another gym, or,
so many things that can go wrong.
There's so many things. Like there was in the Sydney lockdown last year, there was a gym here, definitely not mentioning names, but there was a gym that, let's imagine they were one of the best instructors in the world, right? Hypothetically. During the lockdown, they provided no content, no, like, lockdown as in you couldn't do anything, right? No group training outdoors, nothing, right? They provided no online content or interaction for their students during the lockdown, and expected their students just to keep paying their membership fees, right? And didn't offer anything in terms of, after the lockdown, we'll give you this to compensate. Nothing. Not only that, students who went to the gym owner and said, oh man, like I lost my job or whatever it was. I can't keep paying I can't keep supporting the gym during the lockdown because I've lost my job and, food, rent, their response was, yeah, no worries. I'll cancel your payments. But post lockdown, when you want to come back and train, your joining fee will be equal to the amount of money you didn't pay during lockdown if you want to rejoin the gym. Now, like, you could be Gordon Ryan, you could be Fabio, you could be Andre Galvão, Danaher, one of the best coaches in the world. But then if you have policies like that at your gym, dude, for me, that's pretty rough.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're an egomaniac and you can't manage people, you're not a real leader, and you can't manage the business side of house, because there's a whole nother rabbit hole in terms of that, which we sort of touched on. Then, so there's a lot of different factors that come into being successful as a brand and a business in any industry, let alone jiu-jitsu. So
and I wish Gordon all the best. Apart from me not having a lot of tolerance for his online persona, I've never met him personally. For all I know, he's a super lovely dude.
We'll have to bring him onto the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure he's frothing to get on here.
Who isn't?
Yeah, but I wish him nothing but the best. As a jiu-jitsu, as someone who lives through jiu-jitsu, makes their living through jiu-jitsu, and a fan of jiu-jitsu, I'm just stoked to see other people be able to make a living in the sport. The more the merrier, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
If Gordon opens a gym and he's successful and he has a cool affiliate program, great. All the other people from the Danaher squad who have gone their own separate ways, I hope they're successful. And
well, when they do establish in Austin, we should do a road trip.
Why not? It's a short drive, right? Well,
shit.
Who knows when we can
over the bridge.
Who knows when we can internationally travel again on our big little island down here in Australia?
As soon as we can, jiu-jitsu jiu-jitsu trips abroad or on
Well,
top of this? I want to go to Brazil.
Yeah, there's
We're doing
plenty
that.
of students who would love to do a trip with me back to the Alliance
I'm in.
headquarters in Brazil. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Imagine that, having a squad of us go over to do a bit of a whatever it is, 2-3 week camp. It'd be a lot of fun.
Traveling podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I think we'll leave it there for this episode. But yeah, that makes sense. I'm really glad we were able to talk about not only the whole like big news and cover that topic, but also talk about how this has happened before in history and what we can learn from that. So
it'll happen again as well, man.
Yeah, of course.
Like, it could happen any day. Like maybe Kieren or Hulk have a blowout with Andre Galvao when they leave Atos. Like, man, it happens. It happens all the time. Keenan left Atos due to personality clashes. Like, Keenan will have students one day that leave. Like, and even Fabio, having learned everything he's learned, you'll always have people, no matter what you provide them, will choose to go their own way.
Yeah, and you can look at that as a positive thing, and it's expanding the sport.
Yeah. Next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about, we've just had the Tokyo Olympics.
Yes.
Which have, in terms of combat sport, they've had for a long time, like judo, karate, taekwondo,
wrestling,
boxing. A lot of people ask, why isn't jiu-jitsu in the Olympics?
Find out why.
Find out why. Yeah, find out. We'll talk our opinions. I think for me, it's very straightforward why it's not an Olympic sport. We'll talk about that. So if that interests you, stay tuned.